Good evening, everybody. This is Katje. I welcome you to my YouTube channel. And this evening I'm wearing my Kate Spade emerald dress. I've worn it before, but I wanted to bring it back out and share it with you again. Also, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be away for the next week or so because I have to go back east and visit some family and friends that I haven't seen in a long time. So I'll be away from my YouTube video channel, but I hope to make more videos when I return. What I want to do this evening is go back to something that I was talking about last time and maybe a couple of times before, and this has to do with Nietzsche. I know that I said I was going to leave this alone, but a couple of things occurred to me that I wanted to share with you because I think they're very interesting. So what I'm going to do tonight is go back to this idea that Nietzsche has, that the whole idea of a self, that each one of us has a self that is the bearer of our experiences, that underlies our experiences, that this is kind of an illusion, it is an illusion, that we project from our stream of experiences and various phenomena, no one of which is a persisting self, but somehow we project this notion of an Ich or an I or a self in German, and then from that we have the notion of kind of stable being that we project onto the world so that we come up with things that persist through change, objects, if you will. That's very central to the first theological position that I described, the glass-tie theology. Now what I want to do tonight is make good on a promissory note of Nietzsche's that Nietzsche doesn't really make good on. He says that we project this notion of the Ich and this notion of a stable external object from our own stream of experiences and phenomena that are going on inside of us, but he doesn't really say how that works. He makes that claim in Götterdämmerung, but he doesn't give us an account of how we make this projection. So I want to do that this evening, and I also want to reiterate a point that I made several times previously, and that is, in order for Nietzsche's point to be philosophically interesting, I don't think he has to prove that there's no such thing as a self. I don't think he has to prove it, but I think what he wants to do is say, well, what if that were the case? For all we know, it might be that rather there being sort of a ground level self that we encounter, that we don't project, it is something that we construct from experience. It's a kind of illusion. How do we know that that's not the case? And if Nietzsche can tell a story about how we might come up with this idea that doesn't correspond to anything in reality, then that would undercut the idea that, well, the only way of interpreting our experience is to say, well, there is this stable self underlying our experiences. It might be a soul, or it might be a material substance of some kind, depending on your metaphysics. But Nietzsche would say, no, what if that's not the case? What if I can tell a different kind of story about that? So that's what I'm going to do tonight. So how might that story go? Well, let's start out with feelings that we might have. So, for example, yesterday I might have had the feeling, suppose I had the feeling of being sad. And then today, that's replaced by, I have another feeling, the feeling of being happy. And so here we have these feelings. And the feelings are sort of like emotional qualities that we have. And sometimes we have sometimes there's one emotional quality, and then later there's another one. Yesterday there was sadness, today there's happiness. So here we have qualities at different times. Then another thing we have is like today, suppose when I'm feeling happy, I remember that yesterday I felt sad. And so now I have this memory, this phenomenon of memory, and let's suppose that my memory is just another fleeting experience, like the feeling of being sad yesterday and my feeling of being happy today. My memory is just another fleeting experience that I have, but it's not just a free-floating quality. It's directed towards my feeling of sadness because it is precisely the memory of being sad. So we might say that the memory is the bearer of the earlier sadness. It's an event, a mental event, that is the bearer of the sadness because it's the memory of that earlier sadness. Now, the memory itself doesn't persist through time. It's not a subject Because yesterday I didn't have a memory of being sad, I was just sad. And tomorrow I might remember something else, but that's another memory. I might have another memory of being sad the day before yesterday, that, by that point, but that's a different memory. But the point is that whenever I have a memory of my earlier sadness, I have a phenomenon, a mental phenomenon, a fleeting event that is the bearer of one of these accidents, namely the earlier experience of being sad, because the memory is about the feeling of sadness. So the memory has that property of being a bearer of something. Now, there's something else that's going on, though. There is something that might persist through this change where, well, earlier I had the feeling of sadness yesterday, and then today I have the feeling of happiness together with my memory of being sad yesterday. And that is, throughout that entire time period, I might have a kind of belief that, for example, I might believe, both yesterday and today, I have the same belief that the earth revolves around the sun, let's say. So I have a belief. Now the belief itself, like the feelings, like the memory of the earlier feeling, the belief itself is nothing but a fleeting event. Or it might be. Suppose, what if it were nothing but that? So all we have here are a bunch of fleeting events. Some of them are qualities, like the feelings. Another one of them is a bearer, like the memory. And then the other one is something that persists. That's the belief. It persists through a change where, first of all, there's one quality, the feeling of being sad yesterday, and then a later quality, the quality of feeling happy today. So then, Nietzsche might say, what happens is that we take those three aspects, being a quality, being a bearer of a quality, and being something that underlies the transition from one quality to another, and we say, well, maybe there's something that has all of those things. There's some object, me, myself, my I, underlying the feelings and the memory and the belief. There's this object, the self, das Ich, let's say in German, that is a bearer of a quality. It's not itself a quality, but it's a bearer of a quality, and it also persists through the change from one quality to another, because when the earlier quality was there and then later was replaced by another quality of feeling, the same ish was there. So we come up with something that has, interestingly, the features that both the belief has and that the memory has. In other words, this fictitious, or this ish, this supposed object that's underlying my experiences, it's both the bearer of certain qualities, right? Because like my memory, it can be about these feelings, or it can bear them, and it also persists through the change from one quality to another. Now, Nietzsche might say, really, in reality, in the stream of my experiences, there's nothing like that. What we have, though, are things with these different characteristics, like being a bearer and being something that persists, because notice that the belief itself is not a bearer of qualities. It's not about the feelings, it just persists through them. And the memory itself is not, that doesn't persist through the qualities, because earlier I didn't have a memory of the feeling, I just had the feeling. But then we come up with something that has both. It's both a bearer of these qualities, and it persists through them, even though in the situation there really isn't anything like that, and we call it a self. Okay, what if that were the case? What if that's how we came up with the notion of the self? There isn't anything like that, it's just that we cobble together this fictitious object out of the various characteristics that things that are there do have. And then what happens is that we project the notion of a stable object that underlies different experiences or different qualities that it bears, not just from the self, but we also project it onto the world so that there are things out there. So, for example, the tree that serves as a trackle clock that I am supposed to go to, and then I can become aware of various changes that have transpired in my life or that might transpire. That tree is supposed to be a stable thing. And at one point, it may have certain qualities, like it may be in shade, it may have shadows all over it, and then at another time the shadows disappear and it's fully illuminated, or sometimes it may have leaves and sometimes it may not. But the point is, we project this notion of a stable thing onto the external world, and that's where we come up with the notion of a trackle clock or a stable measure that we need in order to measure these changes. Even though Nietzsche would say there isn't anything like that. All there is are these various physical phenomena, these events. We call one a tree, but really that's just a bunch of biological events that takes place stretched out through time. And then we have these other qualities like shadows falling or sunlight falling. And then, but when we project this notion of a stable thing, then we make it sound like there's something underlying all of that, just like there's a self supposedly underlying all my experiences. Or Nietzsche might say, what if that's what's really going on? How do we know that that's not going on? If we can't rule out the possibility that all of that's really going on, then we can't really be sure that our experience really supports the idea of a self that's going to confront changes and make decisions about them, and then is going to use an external measure like a tree or a rock or a park or some other kind of stable entity that can function as a trackle clock. All of that might just be a bunch of illusions. It doesn't have anything to do with reality. And if that's the case, then it looks like the Gelassenheit theology is in serious trouble. So that's the kind of critique, projectivist critique, that I envision someone who is sympathetic to Nietzsche making against Gelassenheit theology. And so that's what I wanted to say. And notice, it doesn't really matter whether we identify the self that underlies our experiences as an immaterial soul, which is what Descartes thinks, or maybe it's the brain or a material object, maybe it's a purely material thing, as Gassendi or some other, or Hobbes or other materialists might think. It doesn't matter. In either case, according to Nietzsche, we have, or we could have, for all we know, we could have something that's totally fictitious here that we have kind of cobbled together out of the different features that characterize our mental life, but that no one thing possesses all of those features. That's just a fiction. So I wanted to say that. Now, next time, after I get back from my trip, I hope, and I would like, to make a video about Nietzsche's critique of morality, and one way to understand it. There's a lot going on there that Nietzsche says, and I'm not going to be able to cover all of it, but why is he so skeptical about moral judgments and the moral qualities of good and evil? We saw that the Gelassenheit theology and also the Streich theologian has to have some kind of interaction with those notions in the development of their theology. So I want to talk about, next time if I have the chance, I would like to talk about Nietzsche's critique of that and try to explain how I think it's supposed to go. But that's a job for another time. I'm not going to do that this evening, so that's all I have to say. I thank you for watching this, and I hope that you will have enjoyed this video. I do look forward to making my trip, and I look forward to seeing all of you next time. So until then, this is Katje Eckhart wishing everybody a restful and a peaceful good evening. Thank you so much for joining me. Good night.